Hi, I'm Lucy, and welcome to Beautifully Unfinished, the podcast that reminds us that we're not alone in this world. I've been thinking a lot lately about getting older. Not necessarily the getting older that shows up in the mirror, although believe you me, I notice that a lot these days, but I'm more meaning about the kind of getting older that happens quietly, the kind that comes from living. From loving people, from losing people, from making mistakes, from having your heart broken and putting it back together, from watching your children grow up and leave the house, from making decisions you never imagined you would have to make, and from realizing perhaps a little later in life than you would have liked to admit that time is actually quite precious. And I think something happened to me the older I got. And I think the older I get, the less I want to pretend. I don't know exactly when it all happened. Maybe it was turning 50. Maybe it was everything that happened before I turned 50. I don't know. Maybe it's simply that after you've lived enough life, pretending just becomes plain and simply exhausting. It takes so much energy pretending. Pretending you're fine takes energy. Pretending something doesn't hurt when it does takes energy. Pretending you're happy when you're not takes energy. Pretending you don't care what people think, that takes energy. Pretending you don't want something because you're frightened of what other people might say about it takes energy. And sometimes I think you eventually reach a point when you're just too tired to keep doing it. Not because you've suddenly become fearless. Quite the opposite, actually. You may actually be more frightened than you've ever been before. But you're exhausted from carrying the weight of the person you think you're supposed to be. And there's something quite terrifying about putting that down. Because when you stop pretending, you have to start becoming honest. And honesty can be very uncomfortable. It doesn't always go down well. People don't always like the new version of you. They may prefer the version who said yes to everything, the version who kept the peace, the version who didn't make waves, who swallowed her feelings and said, I'm fine. And suddenly you're saying, actually, I'm not fine. I don't want to do that. That doesn't work for me anymore. I've changed my mind. I want something different. And perhaps the hardest one of all, this is the life that I want to live. That can be terrifying territory because when you stop pretending, you can no longer hide behind what everybody expects of you. And I think that's one of the strange contradictions of getting older. You become more comfortable in your own skin while simultaneously becoming more uncomfortable with the life you've been living. Because you start noticing things. You notice the conversations that leave you drained and you are too exhausted to just entertain them anymore. You're just over it. The relationships that no longer feel reciprocal. The things that you keep doing simply because you have always done them. The dreams you quietly put away and you start asking questions. Is this actually what I want? Does this fit with me? Am I happy? And sometimes the answers are a bit uncomfortable. There comes a point when discomfort of being honest becomes easier than the exhaustion of pretending. The older I get, the more life I have witnessed and the more people I have loved and lost. There's something about losing people you love that changes your understanding of time. When you're in your 20s, life feels enormous. You have this huge runway ahead of you. There's always another year, another opportunity, another relationship, another career move, another holiday, and somehow one day feels like a perfectly reasonable place to put your life. But then you get older and you start seeing that the runway isn't endless. You lose someone that you love. You attend another funeral. You hear about somebody your age who has become really ill. You watch your children grow up and realize how quickly have the years gone. And suddenly one day doesn't feel quite as comfortable anymore because you begin to understand that life isn't promised in the way we behaved as it was when we were younger. And I'm not saying that to be morbid. I'm saying it because for me, it has become incredibly motivating. Life is precious. And if I've been given this life, I want to make it count. I actually think in some strange way, we owe it to the people who have gone before us. Not because we have to live some extraordinary or spectacular life, no. Not because every day has to be filled with adventure, but because they don't get another day and we do. We get to wake up. We get to love. We get to laugh. We get to make mistakes. We get to start again. We get to watch a sunset. We get to dance aimlessly. We get to fall in love and we get to try something new. We get to say things that matter, and I don't want to waste that opportunity pretending to be someone that I'm not. I think that's why for me, live life and make it count has become somewhat of a mantra. Not live life perfectly, not make every moment count, because honestly, sometimes I don't want every moment to count. Sometimes I want to sit on the couch and watch something mindlessly. Sometimes I want to eat that ice cream. Sometimes I want to do absolutely nothing. Making life count, I think, means being intentional about the things that matter. It means not postponing all the good stuff until the imaginary future when everything is sorted out. That's never going to happen. And I'm beginning to realize that there's no magical point where everything is sorted out. There will always be something, another problem, another disappointment, another decision. And if we wait until life is perfectly settled before we allow ourselves to really live it, we may be waiting forever. Because pretending takes me away from what is real. And I want what is real. I want those real conversations, the real relationships, the real laughter, the real tears, the real connection. I want to be able to say this is hard, but I'm happy. And I want to admit when I'm frightened without allowing fear to make every decision for me. Because here's the thing about getting older. I don't think we necessarily become braver. I think we simply become more aware of what's at stake. And that is why some of the decisions we make later in life feel so much bigger. When you're 25, you can jump. When you're 55, you may stand at the edge for a while and think, good grief, are we really doing this? And maybe courage isn't about not being frightened. Maybe it's about saying, yes, I am frightened, but I don't want fear to decide the rest of my life. And perhaps that's where it gets a little more personal for me, because somewhere along the way, something happened that I didn't quite expect. I fell in love again. I found myself looking at my life and thinking, am I really going to let fear keep making these decisions for me? And the answer was surprisingly no. Not because I suddenly became fearless, quite the opposite. It has been terrifying. Because when you build a life around being independent, about knowing where you stand, about keeping everything safe and predictable, choosing to step outside that can feel like standing on the edge of something extremely high, but like a cliff. But love has a funny way of making you question the status quo. And suddenly I found myself willing to risk it all, willing to disrupt the comfortable, willing to have difficult conversations, to accept that not everyone might immediately understand. And I think what surprised me the most, I wasn't willing to risk everything because I was being reckless. I was willing to risk changing things because for once something felt worth the risk. And perhaps that's one of the privileges of getting older. You have enough life experience to know that you can't control everything. You know things can go very wrong. You know hearts can break. You know people can disagree with your choices. And yet you also know that if you spend your whole life protecting yourself from everything that could possibly hurt you, you might also protect yourself from some of the most beautiful things life has to offer. And strangely enough, the people I worry about the most, the people whose opinions mattered enormously to me, seem to be accepting it. And perhaps that has been another lesson for me. Sometimes we spend so much time imagining the reaction of other people that we don't give them enough credit. We imagine the disappointment, we imagine the questions, the judgment, the "are you sure?" And sometimes when we finally take that brave step, we discover that the people who love us are actually more capable of accepting our choices than we gave them credit for. Maybe they don't understand everything. Maybe they have their own fears. But perhaps they can see that we're happy. And perhaps that's enough. I do think something has shifted in me. And I think that's where I am right now. Still learning, still getting things very wrong, still sometimes saying I'm fine when I'm absolutely not, still caring too much about what people think, still worrying, still second-guessing myself. I'm not standing here pretending I have it all figured out, but I am increasingly unwilling to spend the precious time I have left pretending that I don't know what I know. And maybe that's what getting older really gives us. Perspective. We begin to understand what matters. We begin to understand what doesn't matter. We realize that some things we thought were enormous really aren't. And some of the small things we barely noticed are actually everything. Most importantly, the opportunity to wake up tomorrow, to open your eyes and say, "Thank you, Lord, for another beautiful day." Another day to love and to laugh. Another day to get things wrong and try again. Another day to make a different choice and make a difference in this world. Another day to appreciate the people I have in my life and to remember the people who aren't here anymore. Because the older I get, the more I realize that another day is not something we're promised. It's a gift. And I think I want to get better at treating it like one. So if you're listening to this and you're somewhere in that strange middle place where you know you want something to change but you're terrified of what that change might mean, I just want to say this. You don't have to have the whole road mapped out. You don't have to know exactly where you're going in this world and in this life. You don't have to make everyone understand. And you certainly don't have to pretend that you're not scared. Maybe you just have to be honest about what you want and then take just the next step. Because perhaps getting older isn't about having fewer possibilities. Perhaps it's about finally understanding which possibilities are worth taking. And I'm finding that the older I get, the less I want to pretend. I don't want to pretend I'm fine when I'm not, and I don't want to pretend I don't care when I actually do. I don't want to spend my life trying to make everyone else comfortable while quietly making myself smaller. And I don't want to keep waiting for the perfect moment to live. Because I've watched enough life now to know that the perfect moment doesn't necessarily ever arrive. This is the moment. This is life. This is the runway that we've got. And for me, that has become my reminder. Live life. Make it count. Not perfectly, not fearlessly, just honestly. Because maybe the greatest freedom that comes from getting older is finally realizing that we don't have to pretend anymore. And maybe that's the unfinished part of all of us. But hopefully with every year that passes, we're becoming a little more honest about who we are and how we want to spend the time that we've been given. And perhaps that's enough. Thanks so much for spending a few minutes with me today. And if something in this conversation has actually resonated with you, I hope you'll take it with you into the week ahead. If you enjoyed the episode, I'd love it if you'd like, follow and subscribe. It really just helps keep this podcast going and reach more people who need to hear it. Until next week, take care. Bye for now.